They say prosperity starts in the mind, but in Feng Shui, it often begins in your kitchen, and more specifically, with your rice container. This one quiet object, often overlooked and tucked into a corner, carries more energetic influence over your finances than most people realize. Rice doesn't just feed the body, it represents continuity, nourishment, and abundance. And the way you store it silently tells your home what kind of wealth you're prepared to hold. Many households treat the rice bin as an afterthought. It's placed too close to the stove, shoved next to the trash, or left sitting on the floor in a plastic tub. It still works, but energetically, it's leaking. It's scattering the chi that should be grounding your stability. And when the object that symbolizes your daily sustenance is handled without care or intention, that message begins to ripple through your entire space. You may start to feel like money slips through your fingers, like financial peace never fully settles, or like your hard work isn't leading to long-term results. In Feng Shui, storage is never just about convenience, it's about containment. And rice, as a symbol of stable energy, deserves a placement that reflects trust, not chaos. When placed properly, elevated, protected, and aligned with the right direction, your rice container becomes a quiet but powerful activator of prosperity. So today we're not just going to talk about rice. We're going to explore 3 of the most common placement mistakes that unknowingly block wealth from flowing through your home, and how to fix them using practical, grounded Feng Shui principles that work with your environment, not against it. But before we dive in, I invite you to support this channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs a fresh look at their home, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. Once we reach 2,000 subscribers, I'll be releasing a complete kitchen energy alignment ritual you can use every new month to keep abundance circulating clearly and calmly through your space. Rice as a Feng Shui symbol, what it really represents. In classical Feng Shui, rice has never been seen as an ordinary staple. While in modern homes it may sit quietly in a pantry or plastic bin, energetically it holds the weight of something far greater. Rice, in its essence, is one of the most potent representations of nourishment, stability, and wealth flow available in the home. Its symbolism extends beyond culture and tradition. It formed part of the very structure of earth element chi, which governs sustainability, support, and grounded prosperity. And because Feng Shui is a study of placement, interaction, and energy flow, where and how this energy is stored has a direct impact on how it influences your space. When we refer to rice in a Feng Shui context, we're not only talking about food, we're talking about the energetic embodiment of wealth that feeds the body, supports the mind, and sustains the home's long-term flow. The rice container isn't just a bin, it's a visual and vibrational symbol of a household's readiness to receive and preserve fortune. When clean, covered, and elevated, the rice container reflects preparation. It suggests the family living within is in harmony with the concept of steady, accessible abundance. But when the rice container is neglected, left dirty, half empty, exposed to moisture, or shoved next to appliances or waste bins, it begins to send a completely different signal to the chi circulating through your home. That signal is one of instability, depletion, and lack of control over resources. In Feng Shui, we evaluate not just the physical state of the object, but its message. A full, clean rice container kept in a well-lit, protected space whispers, "We are taken care of. More is always welcome." But a rice bin placed directly on the floor, left uncovered, or stored under counters often mutters, "We're just getting by. Resources are reactive, not reliable." And this difference may sound small, but energy listens to the environments we create, not just the words we speak. This is why a rice bin left with only a handful of grains may do more energetic damage than a missed payment. The space begins to vibrate with lack before you ever check your bank balance. The energetic link between rice and abundance is also evident in the ancient practice of symbolic substitution in Feng Shui cures. Where gold coins may be out of reach or feel too symbolic, grains of rice have always been considered the practical stand-in. That's because they are tangible, grounded, and universally accessible. But just like coins that are corroded or scattered, rice that's spoiled, spilled, or forgotten loses its charge. In energetic terms, the qi has detached. The nourishment has hollowed out. You might still be eating rice, but your home may no longer be absorbing its support. Think of it like this. Rice is to the home what fuel is to a vehicle. It's not the flashiest part, but without it, everything stalls. And when you ignore where and how you store your fuel, your financial engine may start to run unevenly. Progress, delay, frustration, correction. It becomes harder to save, harder to feel settled. You may experience a wave of unexpected expenses, or find that every gain is followed by an equal or greater loss. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes the leak is subtle. You spend more on groceries but feel less satisfied. You earn more income but never feel ahead. You declutter your home but somehow still feel heavy. And often that contradiction lives in overlooked spaces, especially where you store what sustains you. This is where the energetic importance of rice surpasses mere symbolism. In Feng Shui, earth element anchors are the foundation for all other energy movement. Without earth, there is no nourishment for metal, no stability for fire, no support for water. And rice is a physical representation of earth, plays an anchoring role not just in diet, but in the energetic grid of the home. When it's placed correctly, it creates a center of gravity. It balances the scattered energy in the kitchen, offsets excessive fire, and stabilizes wealth chait so it can accumulate rather than escape. But when ignored or misaligned, it contributes to energetic fragmentation. People may feel unsure, overwhelmed, reactive, or stuck in survival mode without understanding why. There's also the factor of volume. Feng Shui logic suggests that containers connected to wealth should never be allowed to remain empty. In the case of rice, an underfilled container reflects a weakened signal to the universe. It may suggest that the household doesn't expect to receive more, or worse, is bracing for less. To maintain an active qi signature, the container should always remain at least 70% full. This isn't about superstition, it's about maintaining symbolic readiness. Just as an empty water tank invites drought, an empty rice bin invites scarcity. And even if you believe you're financially stable, an unkept rice bin can begin to create subtle emotional and financial unease simply by broadcasting the wrong energetic tone throughout your home. So what does a well-aligned rice container look like in Feng Shui terms? It sits elevated, never on the floor. It is covered or stored in a closed cabinet to preserve its energy field. It is full but not overflowing, symbolizing contentment without hoarding. It is clean, dry, and made of natural or semi-natural material such as wood, ceramic, or stainless steel to harmonize with the earth element. It is never placed near moisture, flame, or decay. And perhaps most importantly, it is treated with respect, not reverence, but conscious care, because the message it sends is quiet, but consistent, and your space is always listening. Rice doesn't just fill your bowl, it fills the field. And when you begin to treat your rice supply as a conductor of energetic nourishment, not just nutrition, you activate one of the most fundamental yet overlooked wealth harmonizers in your home. You stop chasing abundance and instead start creating the conditions where abundance can stay. The 3 most damaging placement mistakes: too close to the stove or oven. In classical Feng Shui day, every element in the home is more than material. It is a representative of energetic interaction, and few interactions are more consequential than the elemental relationship between earth and fire. Earth governs nourishment, stability, and support, while fire governs movement, transformation, and intensity. Both are necessary in a balanced environment, but when they collide too closely in the wrong context, imbalance follows. This is especially true in the kitchen, where the stove, the central fire source, sits in constant dialogue with the items around it. When the rice container, a pure symbol of earth element in wealth anchoring, is placed too close to the stove or oven, it becomes subject to what Feng Shui masters call a heat clash. And while the rice may remain edible and the kitchen function may appear normal, the energetic consequences of that proximity often manifest in the household in surprisingly subtle but destabilizing ways. Fire, when excessive or unregulated, weakens earth. This principle is as old as the five-element cycle itself. In practical terms, this means that the energetic field of fire burns away Earth's ability to hold, store, and protect. Rice, being a dense earth-aligned food, depends on cool, steady qi to fulfill its purpose, not only as nourishment, but as a symbolic anchor of prosperity. When it is exposed to the volatile energy of fire, its stabilizing quality is compromised. In the language of Qi, what once stood still becomes disrupted. What was meant to nourish begins to overheat, and what should have quietly held fortune begins to release it prematurely. This is why households that store rice too close to heat often report very specific patterns. Financial gains that don't last, income that arrives and then vanishes without explanation, periods of high earnings followed by unexpected expenses, or savings that feel like they're always one step behind. These are not accidents. In Feng Shui, qi cannot accumulate when it is constantly being agitated by competing energy fields. Just as you wouldn't rest your most important documents beside a fireplace, you wouldn't energetically place your wealth anchor beside the most volatile force in the room. It's not just about the rice spoiling faster or the container warping under heat. It's about the symbolic clash of purpose. The stove's function is to break things down, to cook, to transform raw into usable. That energy is productive in its zone. But the rice container's role is to preserve, to hold, to remain. When the two are positioned too close, especially within 30 to 40 centimeters of each other, they don't harmonize. They argue. And that argument doesn't stay in the kitchen. It often shows up in the emotional field of the home as well. Family members may experience increased tension around resource-related conversations. Decisions about money may feel rushed or impulsive. Shared meals may lack calm. Even cooking itself may feel like a task instead of a centering ritual. Now, from a Feng Shui correction standpoint, the solution is not difficult but requires discipline. The rice container must be moved. Ideally, it should be placed at least 50 centimeters, approximately 20 inches, away from any direct heat source. This includes ovens, rice cookers, air fryers, and microwaves that radiate concentrated warmth. If kitchen space is limited, place a natural buffer, such as a thick wooden cutting board, ceramic barrier, or fabric curtain, between the rice container and the heat source to absorb and redirect the energetic spill. Elevate the rice container slightly if possible to create a field of respect and symbolic separation. If cabinetry allows, store the rice in a closed cabin or drawer, ideally one located in the southeast or east part of the kitchen. Zones associated with family nourishment and gradual wealth expansion. Beyond placement, one should also consider material. Containers made of ceramic, thick glass, or natural wood are better suited to withstand and neutralize environmental tension. Plastic, especially dark or transparent varieties, absorbs fire energy poorly and offers no reflective shield. Stainless steel may reflect but often scatters, which means that in tight kitchen layouts, Ceramic becomes the most energetically grounding material for long-term stability. There is also the energetic principle of contrast management. Fire energy is not inherently destructive. It becomes disruptive only when left unbalanced. When rice is stored across from or directly adjacent to the stove, the space loses contrast. Everything becomes fire-dominant, which leads to financial and emotional overheating. Restoring earth-fire balance through placement, separation, and buffering invites contrast back into the room, allowing both elements to do their jobs. Fire to transform food, earth to hold fortune. And when that balance is restored, the room doesn't just look cleaner or better organized, it feels safer, calmer, more supportive. The family's relationship with resources, both tangible and energetic, shifts quietly but powerfully. So if you've been experiencing financial fluctuations, emotional stress in the kitchen, or a general sense of never feeling caught up despite efforts, look to the space between your stove and your rice. That narrow margin may be where your stability has been getting scorched. And by honoring the elemental harmony your home is asking for, you begin to repair not just a placement mistake, but a leak in your entire flow of fortune. Placed directly on the floor. In the study of classical Feng Shui, placement is not just a matter of function, it is a declaration of value. Where an object sits within a space determines not only how energy flows to and around it, but how it is energetically perceived. And when it comes to objects that symbolize nourishment, prosperity, and long-term security, like the rice container, placement becomes especially critical. One of the most common yet energetically draining mistakes people make is storing their rice container directly on the floor. To the untrained eye, this might seem efficient or practical. After all, the floor is solid, accessible, and often where there is space. But from an energetic standpoint, placing something of high symbolic value on the ground begins to unravel its energetic integrity almost immediately. In Feng Shui, the floor represents the zone of dense, residual qi. It is where used energy settles. It is where stagnation collects, especially in corners or behind furniture. The floor is not inherently bad, but it is not neutral. It carries everything: foot traffic, dirt, the vibration of exhaustion after a long day. And when an object associated with life-giving energy, such as rice, is placed in this lowest energetic zone, the message becomes distorted. The container begins to absorb not just dust and moisture, but the subconscious impression that what it holds is no longer important. The message shifts from reverence to neglect, from sacred to expendable. This energetic downgrade does not stay confined to the kitchen. It begins to ripple outward into the financial atmosphere of the home. The results may not be immediate, but they are deeply felt. Home owners who keep their rice bins on the floor often report a shared pattern: effort without recognition, income without impact, progress that feels heavy rather than empowering. They may feel that their work goes unnoticed, that raises are delayed, or that their contributions are consistently undervalued. What is happening energetically is that their symbol of financial stability, their rice container, is being pulled downward. It's not being elevated. It's not being honored. And as a result, the message it sends to the surrounding qi is one of lowered expectation, weakened capacity, and wealth that is always just out of reach. Moreover, placing the rice bin on the floor can lead to physical disruptions that reinforce the energetic misalignment. The container becomes vulnerable to moisture, pests, accidental spills, or constant movement. This adds chaos to an object that should symbolize calm. Even worse is when the bin is placed under kitchen counters or hanging cabinets. These overhanging elements compress the qi, creating a downward force that metaphorically presses on the stored nourishment. In Feng Shui terms, this is a double compression. Low position plus heavy overhead wait. Energetically, it's the equivalent of asking your finances to grow in a cave with no light or air. The environment does not support upward movement. It stifles it. The correction is clear, and it does not require remodeling. The key is elevation. The rice container must be lifted at least 30 centimeters, or roughly 12 inches, off the ground. This can be achieved with a simple wooden riser, a small bench, a storage crate, or even a designated cabinet shelf. The material matters too. Wood is ideal as it harmonizes with earth element energy and encourages upward chi circulation. Stone or metal may also be used, provided they are stable and do not reflect excessive heat or cold. Avoid plastic platforms or flimsy stools, as these introduce instability into the energetic signal and may visually or symbolically reinforce transience. When the rice is elevated, the shift is immediate and unmistakable. The kitchen feels more contained, the space feels more respected. Financial thoughts begin to settle into structure rather than drift into worry. This is not magic, it is resonance. In Feng Shui, what you elevate receives more qi. What you protect becomes more powerful. When the rice bin is lifted from the floor, its energetic purpose is restored. It once again holds the role of support, not burden. It serves as a center of gravity for wealth qi to gather, not disperse. The other layer to consider is visibility. Once elevated, the rice container should also be placed in a position that is visually acknowledged but not constantly exposed. A semi-hidden cabinet with good air circulation is perfect. An open shelf near waist height is also acceptable, provided it remains clean and undisturbed. Think of the placement as a subtle altar, not in a religious sense, but in terms of energetic hierarchy. You are giving your food, your fortune, your home's anchor of nourishment, a proper place. And in doing so, you are telling your environment that you are ready to hold more, not just more rice, but more opportunity, more clarity, more upward movement. It is also wise to observe your feelings during this correction. Many people report an unexpected emotional reaction when they lift their rice container off the ground for the first time. It may feel oddly satisfying, like finally aligning something that was never meant to be overlooked. Others feel a surge of calm, as if their space has finally released a quiet frustration that had been lingering for months or even years. This is the power of symbolic feng shui. It brings attention to the unseen patterns that shape the seen results. Ultimately, your rice container should not sit where energy dies. It should sit where energy rises. It should not be something your foot brushes against or your groceries crowd out. It should be steady, respected, and quietly central. Because rice is not just food. In your home, it is a metaphor for your relationship to stability itself. And when you lift it, protect it, and store it with care, you begin to lift your own financial alignment out of the shadows and into a space where it can breathe, grow, and quietly support you day after day. Position near trash, drains, or wet corners. In classical feng shui, one of the most misunderstood forms of energy pollution is the subtle, silent influence of proximity. Not everything in your space needs to be broken to cause energetic harm. Sometimes it's not the object itself, but what sits near it that gradually distorts its purpose. And nowhere is this more evident than in the case of rice storage placed near sources of decay. Trash bins, drains, mold-prone corners, or even overflowing compost containers. Though these placements may seem harmless or simply convenient, they create a persistent energetic clash that slowly weakens one of the most vital energy fields in the home, the field of nourishment. Rice, as understood in Feng Shui, is a wealth anchor. It represents long-term nourishment, provision, and stored potential. But in order to fulfill its role, rice requires a very specific environmental field, one that is dry, contained, elevated, and protected. The moment it is placed near dampness or decay, its energy field begins to unravel. Moisture introduces yang excess, and while yin is not inherently negative, an overabundance of it, especially from wet or unclean areas, leads to energetic heaviness, stagnation, and internal depletion. Decay, on the other hand, does more than just lower the qi around the rice container. It distorts the rice's energetic narrative. What should signal readiness, abundance, and calm stability instead becomes infused with the symbolic frequency of waste, rot, and loss. Homeowners with rice containers placed beside trash bins, under leaking sinks, or near dark, mold-prone corners often experience a very specific kind of energetic fatigue, not always dramatic, but consistent. A sense of working hard but getting nowhere. Money comes in, but bills arrive faster. Projects begin, but never quite take off. Small illnesses linger. Motivation stalls. And worst of all, the effort put into the space doesn't seem to return the results it once did. This is not coincidental. In Feng Shui, decay energy, also known as sha qi, is one of the most corrosive forces in the domestic environment. It doesn't strike loudly, it seeps. It spreads quietly, like humidity in a sealed drawer. And the rice, sitting unprotected nearby, absorbs that message without resistance. The issue becomes more concerning when combined with physical factors. Trash bins emit odor, bacteria, and energetic weight. Drains release evaporated gases and qi fragments from used water, what Feng Shui considers spent energy. Wet corners, especially those hidden behind appliances or below countertops, often harbor subtle mold or mildew. These are areas the eye might not immediately notice, but energy always does. And when your rice container is within that field, even if it looks clean on the outside, its qi quality becomes tainted by proximity. The rice may begin to lose its flavor faster. The container might absorb odd smells, and symbolically the space where abundance is stored becomes confused with the space where waste is discarded. Correcting this isn't about overhauling your kitchen or investing in expensive materials. It's about restoring protection. The rice container must be moved to a dry, safe, and energetically clean location. Ideally, it should be stored in a closed cabinet made of natural wood, an element that balances both moisture and earth. This enclosure shields it from environmental intrusion and restores the boundary it requires to hold its qi field. If cabinet space is limited, a rice container can also be placed in a wooden box or chest, preferably one elevated off the ground and located away from the triangle of fire, stove, water, sink, and waste, trash bin. This triangle is often the most energetically chaotic space in the kitchen, and anything precious placed too close to it tends to suffer. For those who must store rice near potential sources of decay due to limited kitchen layout, Feng Shui offers compensatory tools. One method involves placing a thin wooden panel or board between the rice container and the source of decay, symbolically cutting the flow of sha qi. Another involves placing a piece of activated charcoal or Himalayan salt near the rice bin to absorb ambient negativity and moisture. These tools are not magic. They are energetic buffers, reminding the space where one field ends and another begins. But beyond all techniques, the deeper shift comes from reframing the space with intention. Treat the area where rice is stored not as spare space, but as a silent bank of fortune. It deserves protection. It deserves clarity. It should not share its environment with rot, stagnation, or residual waste. And when that separation is restored, households often report a surprising uptick in energy, more productive mornings, easier financial conversations, even a lightness in cooking that had long been missing. In Feng Shui, how you store is how you save. And when you store nourishment next to what you discard, you blur the lines between what should be preserved and what should be purged. The result is not always material loss. Sometimes it's the erosion of mental focus, emotional optimism, or domestic ease. But when rice is placed in a dry, intentional space, removed from decay, surrounded by order, and slightly elevated, the message becomes coherent once again. This home protects what feeds it. This home knows what to keep. And in that knowing, abundance finds a reason to stay. How to anchor abundance in the right direction. When it comes to cultivating long-term prosperity in your home, few adjustments are as simple and as powerful as placing your rice container in the correct direction. In classical Feng Shui, placement isn't just aesthetic, it is strategic. Each part of your home corresponds to a different energy sector, and aligning your most symbolically significant items with the appropriate sector strengthens the flow of life force, or chai, in intentional and meaningful ways. For rice, the embodiment of nourishment, stability, and everyday wealth, the best directional placement is the southeast corner of the kitchen. This area is traditionally known as the wealth corner, and it resonates with the wood element, which represents growth, vitality, and upward movement. By placing the rice container in this location, you are aligning two complementary elements. Wood feeds earth, and rice, as an earth-aligned item, draws strength and steadiness from that nourishment. This synergy does more than align elements on paper. It has real, observable consequences. When rice is stored in the southeast corner, households often notice a deepened sense of ease around financial matters. Expenses feel more manageable. Savings habits become more consistent. Even shopping patterns shift. Less impulsivity, more mindfulness. That's because, energetically, the rice container isn't just storing food anymore. It's anchoring your household's conversation with abundance. It becomes a stable magnet that reinforces the intention of sufficiency and sustainability, allowing wealth chi to gather and remain rather than scatter or flee. But direction alone is not enough. Elevation plays an equally crucial role. In Feng Shui, what is lifted is honored, and what is grounded too low becomes energetically heavy, slow, or overlooked. That's why placing your rice container directly on the floor, even if it's in the right corner, sends a mixed message. It places your wealth symbol at the lowest possible energetic position, where dust, residual chi, and neglected energy gather. By raising it even just 30 centimeters, about 12 inches, you give the chi around it room to circulate. It becomes accessible, visible, and, most importantly, respected. You create an energetic platform for fortune to settle and stabilize, rather than sink or stagnate. How you house the rice is also a conversation with the space around it. Enclosure matters. A rice container stored loosely on an open counter is exposed, vulnerable, and energetically raw. While that may seem convenient, it does little to protect the wealth chi the rice carries. On the other hand, storing the container inside a dedicated cabinet or behind a clean, decorative cover creates a field of containment and reverence. This isn't about hiding the rice, it's about shielding it from scattered energy. Think of it like you would protect a valuable document or a cherished heirloom. Not because it's fragile, but because it deserves distinction. A cabinet door, a soft fabric drape, or even a wooden lid, all of these choices say to your home, this space holds something valuable. And when your home receives that message clearly, it reinforces it through action, stabilizing cash flow, improving digestion of effort into results, and attracting consistent opportunities. There's also the sensory aspect to consider. The area surrounding the rice container should feel clean, dry, and emotionally neutral. Avoid placing it in corners crowded by visual noise, like open shelving packed with clutter, or alongside bold kitchen equipment that dominates the space. You want the rice container to quietly command its own energy field, not compete with chaotic forms. If possible, accent the space with natural materials, a bamboo placemat beneath it, a warm-toned wooden shelf, or a soft golden light above. These elements harmonize with both the wood and earth frequencies, amplifying their interaction and softening the energy signature of the corner. And while the southeast corner is ideal, if your kitchen layout makes that direction inaccessible, the next best approach is to select a location that is dry, peaceful, and away from strong competing forces such as fire, the stove, water, the sink, or decay, the trash. It's better to choose a harmonious neutral zone and treat it with care than to force an awkward placement just for directional precision. Feng Shui is a conversation, not a formula. The energy of intention, care, and spatial respect often outweighs technical alignment when done consistently and sincerely. Ultimately, the goal of ideal placement is to build a relationship between the rice container and its environment, one that supports circulation rather than chaos, protection rather than exposure, and grounded abundance rather than reactive consumption. When rice sits in a position of dignity, supported by direction, lifted by elevation, and housed in a place of quiet containment, it activates its full potential. It no longer simply feeds the body, it feeds the space. It whispers prosperity day after day to the energy flowing through your kitchen. And when that message is clear, your home begins to answer it, not just in symbolic harmony, but in lived results. What your rice container reveals about you. In every home, the state of the rice container tells a quiet story. It's not just a storage vessel, it is a mirror of the household's energetic relationship with nourishment, safety, and financial expectation. In Feng Shui, the appearance and condition of key items don't merely reflect aesthetic preference. They reveal the subconscious posture of the family toward energy flow. And when it comes to something as essential as rice, even the quantity inside the container holds meaning. Over time, patterns emerge. Some homes keep their rice bins nearly empty. Others hoard large quantities without order. A few maintain a steady, clean supply, refreshed regularly but never overstuffed. These differences may seem like habits, but they are energetic archetypes. Each one reflects not only the state of material readiness, but the deeper story of how the occupants view trust, preparation, and wealth itself. The first archetype is the empty bin, typically holding less than 30% of capacity. In practical terms, this may signal that the rice is running low and needs replenishing. But energetically, it points to a deeper pattern of insufficiency. In Feng Shui, emptiness in a container that symbolizes wealth does not equal openness. It equals absence. And when that absence persists, it begins to imprint the surrounding space with a subtle message. This household does not expect to receive. The qi around the kitchen, particularly in the southeast quadrant, becomes thin, tired, and disconnected. Even when money flows in, it doesn't stay. There's a sense of scrambling, of always needing to fill a gap, of catching up rather than building ahead. It becomes a loop of temporary abundance followed by energetic depletion. The homeowners may experience recurring expenses, last-minute borrowing, or the emotional fatigue of constant financial vigilance. And often they won't link it back to something as small as a half-empty bin of rice. But the energy reads clearly. Your anchor is missing, and without it, the flow drifts. Next is the overflowing bin, where rice is stored in excess but left uncared for. Dust gathers around the lid, the container overflows slightly, and it sits exposed or neglected. On the surface, this may appear like abundance, but in Feng Shui, overflow without maintenance is a red flag. It signals imbalance, specifically a form of hoarding based on fear. This archetype suggests that the household is not accumulating wealth from a place of stability, but from a place of mistrust in the future. It is a subtle form of panic. The more I store, the safer I am. But qi responds not to volume, but to order. When rice is kept in excess without clarity, it begins to attract a kind of energetic congestion. People in these homes may feel bloated emotionally, burdened with too much, but still afraid to let go. Financial decisions may become overly cautious. Opportunities may be missed out of fear of loss, or possessions may increase while peace of mind remains stagnant. This is the energy of overcompensation, where the space is trying to control flow rather than trust it. And the result is often a life filled with possessions, but empty of progress. Then there is the balance bin, quietly full, clean, protected, and replenished regularly to hover around 70 to 80% capacity. In Feng Shui, this is the most aligned state. It reflects a healthy relationship to provision. There is enough to feel secure, but not so much that it disrupts the field. This household sends a clear signal to its environment. We trust the rhythm of life. We know when to receive and when to replenish. We are neither grasping nor neglecting. We are prepared, but not panicked. People living in homes with this rice container condition tend to experience steadier financial flow, fewer crises, and a calm sense of control over daily rhythms. They may not be the wealthiest, but they often feel abundant in a way that transcends numbers. Because energetically, their rice is not just being stored, it is being honored. Their container becomes a quiet symbol of readiness. And in the language of qi, readiness invites reinforcement. Opportunities arrive with less friction. Bills are paid with less stress. Meals are prepared with greater ease. And the kitchen, always the center of domestic chai, feels less like a battleground and more like a sanctuary. The question, then, is simple but potent. When you look at your rice container, what story is it telling? Is it reflecting panic, neglect, or trust? Is it whispering that you never have enough, or affirming that you always will? Feng Shui is not about judgment, it's about awareness. These patterns don't arise from superstition. They arise from symbolism. And when you begin to see the rice container not as a kitchen item, but as an energetic journal, you gain the power to rewrite the story it's been telling. You don't need to replace the container, you need to reframe how it is treated. With that shift, even something as ordinary as a bowl of rice becomes a quiet altar to sufficiency and a magnet for wealth that is no longer chasing approval, but resting in readiness. By now, you may never look at your rice container the same way again. What once seemed like a simple storage item may now reveal itself as a quiet, everyday altar, one that holds more than grains. It holds memory, intention, continuity, and if we let it, it holds wealth. Not the kind that arrives in dramatic windfalls, but the kind that builds quietly through rhythm and respect. In Feng Shui, the smallest objects can carry the largest truths, and the rice container, in its simplicity, teaches us a profound one. Where your nourishment lives, your fortune begins, not in your career path, not in your bank app, but in the flow of your home and how it holds or leaks the energy of sufficiency. When your rice is elevated, protected, and placed with care, your space begins to echo a message of readiness. It tells the qi that enters. This house honors what feeds it. This house is prepared to receive. You don't need a renovation. You don't need a new kitchen, a bigger budget, or a design overhaul. What you need is alignment. And alignment starts by repositioning what already supports your life. Your fortune doesn't wait outside. It waits for a place to land. And if the container that holds your daily bread is filled with attention, your opportunities begin to take root in the exact same soil. This is the essence of home-based Feng Shui, not adding complexity, but removing contradiction. So I invite you now, not with pressure, but with presence, to take one small action. Walk to your rice container. Observe where it is, how full it is, and what it's surrounded by. Then ask yourself gently, does this reflect how I want to receive, hold, and circulate abundance in my life? If it doesn't, change it. And if it does, protect it. Either way, you've already begun the practice of energy refinement, the very heart of Feng Shui. And if this video helped you see your kitchen or your finances or your space in a new light, I warmly ask you to help this message reach others. Share it with someone who deserves more steadiness in their life. Leave a comment with the one shift you're inspired to make. And please subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Once we reach 2,000 subscribers, I'll be sharing a monthly rice activation ritual, an easy grounding way to realign your wealth chi at the start of each lunar cycle. No mysticism, just rhythm, just clarity, just a cleaner flow. Because in the end, your rice container is not just where food rests, it's where your energy gathers. It's where your fortune learns whether to stay or keep moving. Let it stay, let it settle, let it rise.